All right, we are live. We got the Understory leadership team here. This is the first of many sessions that we'll be having. We're going to do these every week, at least we're going to try to, and try to provide as much information as possible about what's working in B2B marketing today. For context, we are an all-bound agency. We've got a client list of 35 right now, spread across, everything from GTM engineering. So think all the stuff you see all over LinkedIn with Clay, outbound email, outbound LinkedIn, and all of the different tactics and strategies that go along with it, as well as a ton of paid media. So we're doing paid campaigns across LinkedIn, Google, Reddit, a little bit of Capterra, Quora, G2, some of those more niche channels, but the majority is going to be on those classic B2B channels like LinkedIn and Google. But you're sitting here with the Understory leadership team. So we've got myself. I am one of the co-founders here at Understory, and I manage the GTM engineering side of the business as well as some of the new services that we're starting to offer and a lot of the day-to-day. And I'll pass it over to Ali, who is the other co-founder here.
Yeah, really excited for these. Appreciate you, Alex, for setting everything up and just pushing us to do this. But yeah, like you said, I'm co-founder here at Understory, handle everything paid media related. Been entrenched in B2B advertising for close to a decade now, and so I've definitely seen a lot of different strategies. I think, we've always talked about ourselves and, it is logical to say we're an agency because we're helping like sales and marketing teams generate leads and generate demand and all that. But I think something that I would mentioned in a call recently is we're becoming almost like a data company. You have access to all of this different data, whether it's through enrichments through Clay or all the databases we have access to, and then we're actually actioning that data, and that can happen over paid media or email or whatever it is. Since we're working with B2B SaaS companies specifically, it's going to be those channels. But yeah, it's just very interesting. I think like how we're on the forefront of changing how agencies are operating. But yeah, so really excited to talk more with you guys.
Yeah, and now we've got, two of our premier leaders in the company, but Naufal and Chris, who are heading the GTM engineering departments as well as the paid search departments. Both of them have a ton of experience within both of their domains. I mean, Chris is, I don't even know how many millions. Chris, maybe you can talk about that, but how many millions of ad dollars have been managed by you across paid search? And Naufal, oh my God, the story of Naufal and how we met is actually hilarious. He made a post on LinkedIn. I thought it was brilliant. Reached out to him. He was running his own agency at the time, and we started working together on a fractional basis. And he was just so good, we had to gobble him up full time. And he's been with us ever since. But yeah, I'll let them talk a little bit more about themselves and what they do in their day to day. But yeah, Nafal, maybe you want to start it off.
Sure. Yeah, this is exciting. Exciting that we're finally getting to, you know, come together and and talk about what we do every day. So and share it with everyone. Yeah. So my name is Naufal. I'm the head of GTM at Understory. I, manage and oversee a lot of the outbound clients that we have. So when it comes to cold email and LinkedIn outbound. So yeah, a lot of get with clients and learning what are their pain points and really creating a campaign that would generate meetings and revenue. That's basically it.
The wizard.
Go on,
Yeah.
Chris.
Naufal, that was the wizard of GTM speaking. I'm Chris. So Chris Chambers. I'm the head of paid search here at Understories. So that means like everything Google, Bing related, paid search related, that you would think of traditionally. But then also, kind of like Ali was talking about, we try to always find new ways to incorporate paid search with other channels, which I feel like is lacking a lot in paid search. People tend to think of it as more of a silo, just demand capture type of thing. So we're always working with tools like Clay, different types of AI, Claude, GPTs, right? And just integrating it fully with our all-bound approach. So we really don't like for any channels to just live in a silo. And paid search is one of those. So yeah, I manage our paid search team.
Yes, you do. Cool. Well, guys, I mean, we can talk about everything that we do for hours. We've got about 30 minutes here, but I want to make best use of this time. But really the flow of this is we're going to have a conversation just like we do every week on our leadership calls, just like we do in Slack. I want to just keep it real with everyone and just help everyone understand what's actually working today, what we do as an agency for our clients, what we do for ourselves that works, how we dog food our own ideas before we actually offer them to our clients. Because at the end of the day, we try everything ourselves first. And if it works for us, then we adapt it for our clients, their ICPs, however we need to adapt it and we start offering it to our clients. But we test everything on ourselves. And that's how we know what we do works. And that's how you try it before you buy it, right? So I'll start with the fall because I think cold email And we don't only do cold email. I would say we do warm email, trigger-based outbound, a lot of different stuff as well, especially with all the different, workflows we can actually do in Clay these days. But I feel like a lot of people consider cold email as a very top of funnel channel, right? So how can you build interest and awareness across a broad spectrum of people for a very low cost? So I want to pass it over to Naufal to talk about some of the tactics that we're seeing, especially top of funnel, that are working really well to not only generate interest and generate, direct response, email positive replies that convert into pipeline, but also how we're driving website traffic, how we're able to retarget some of that website traffic once it's actually there with certain tools like RB2B, Koala, all of these different tools that exist. But Naufal is really an expert when it comes to everything about driving awareness and getting those direct response, especially top of funnel. So Naufal, I'll pass it over to you. Let's talk about some of the stuff that you're seeing work across our client portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not going to go into like the technical aspects of it because I think a lot of cold email is to do with the infrastructure that you have. There's landing in Outlook and Google. That's a conversation for itself. But I would say one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is the strategy. So what kind of lists and people can we target where those lists are super, super relevant? So for example, with one client that I'm working with right now, they're targeting family therapists, right? So, there we have to do kind of custom scrapes where, these are publicly available information, but, getting that information from like a directory using a custom scraper like Bardeen to get all of that information. And then once we have that raw data, then we'll put it into Clay. And then that's when Clay will do its magic. So, we'd find the LinkedIn profile, we could find the work email based on the domain, or we could even use a personal email address. So, how you get your list in itself as a campaign, because you could, if let's say you got a list from a specific directory, then that's an angle for you to use. So,
You mean
I would say
name dropping that directory rather than just, going and scraping a tool like Apollo or any of these other big databases, grabbing a list from Sales Nav, something like that. You're saying because we're doing these custom lists and we're scraping from unique databases that we can then name drop in the campaign, say something along the lines of, hey, I found you on, this is why I'm reaching out, that type of thing. That's what you're saying by that?
exactly. It's like you just name drop directory. So then, instantly, when they see your email, they can relate to it and, they make an instant connection and it becomes warm, right? So, because obviously, we have so much, we probably have like 5 seconds to gain interest of, the prospect. So then, we can inspire them to take action, right? Which is,
Yeah, so the more you can bring familiarity to the very beginning of that message, the more likely you are to
yeah.
actually generate interest, have someone actually read your message, and then ultimately respond with either a request for more information or whatever it is, some sort of positive sentiment that you can then build off of.
Exactly that. So yeah, I would say that that's like one avenue that I'm seeing that works quite well a lot of the time.
So what you're saying is the list is the message. I don't know where I read that, but I read that somewhere on LinkedIn and I loved it. But it's true. The list is the message. If you don't get your list right, really nothing else that you're going to do matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, the more obscure list, the better. Like I know maybe you want to talk about the Telegram list that we did recently for one of
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah. That
clients.
is a unique one. That is a unique one. So yeah, I mean, for context, we're working with a company that specializes in return fraud for e-commerce stores. But something that ends up happening a lot that people don't know about is there is monetized return fraud. Sounds crazy, but what it really is, it's people, going in Telegram groups somewhere on the modern dark web and finding loopholes in companies' return policies. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, you want that blender that costs $300? I'll sell it to you for $50 brand new. What we'll do is I'll order the product. I will return the product with a rock in the box rather than the actual blender, and I'll get it for free because of that. And then I'll sell it to you for $50. So I'm making $50 off of scamming another company. So that's what this company does. So what they've been doing is they go into these Telegram groups for return fraud, pretend they're a scammer, pretend they're a fraudster. They grab all these screenshots of people basically just defrauding companies like Ray-Ban or iRobot from Roomba, companies like that. And they're sending us these screenshots that what we're doing from there is we're going into a tool like Disco like, and we're actually finding lookalike companies that are similar. And so what we'll do is we'll go into lookalike search like Disco like. We'll take Ray-Ban. We'll find all the companies that are similar to Ray-Ban. So maybe other additional sunglasses companies, retailers for apparel, something like that. And what we're actually doing is we're name dropping Ray-Ban and we're saying, hey, so-and-so came across this Telegram return fraud group where they're monetizing return fraud against companies like Ray-Ban. we didn't see your name directly, but we thought you might be interested in how this is happening to other companies. It's just a matter of time before you're targeted. By the way, this is how we solve and mitigate for that risk. So something like that. And that has been crushing it for our client. I mean, they're seeing a ton of positive replies. They're seeing a ton of interest. They're actually booking pilots in record time because the list is really good. And these people are super high intent immediately because we've shown social proof that companies similar to them are victims of fraud. So yeah, I think that's a great example, Naufal.
I was killing it right now.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk only about outbound. We're going to do a lot of these, so we'll get into a lot of different stuff. But I also want to be able to talk about a lot of the stuff that Chris and Ali are managing. So for context, Ali manages the entire paid media team, but is very intertwined with paid social in particular because we have Chris managing everything on paid search. But a lot of the time, what we end up doing for our clients too, because we are an all-bound agency, once these positive replies come through and we've built that top of funnel, we end up retargeting a lot of these people via LinkedIn ads. And then we're also doing a lot of branded search efforts. So if people go and actually search the company that was named in that email, we lost Chris here, but people actually go search those companies that were mentioned in the email. And what they're able to do is get hit with a branded search ad. So you search for this company that we talked about. So in this case, our client, let's just say they're called keyboard.com. You go and search up keyboard.com. Even if their SEO is not great, if we're running branded search ads for them, they're usually the first thing that comes up. So we're driving a lot of website traffic that way too. And then from there, using tools like our B2B, Vector, Koala, you name it, we can actually retarget those audiences as well. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Ali, to talk about how we're retargeting these audiences once we built that top of funnel awareness. But tell us a little bit about what's worked for our clients. We're doing a lot of this for ourselves too, and that works really well. But yeah, Ali, I'll pass it over to you to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of relates to what I was talking about at the start of the call, just how we are super focused on the data. When we have those company lists from the outbound side, once we're targeting over email or, pulling through Clay, we can also upload them into LinkedIn ads. If they're already in certain client CRMs as well, there's a native sync between HubSpot and the ad platform. So we're definitely pushing those open opportunities to those ad platforms as well. So again, it really just comes down to being able to track and organize the data, because if you don't have access to that, then you won't be able to action this. I think what you were mentioning before with certain like web de-anonymization tools, like advertisers have been doing that forever. That's just retargeting with a pixel. You install
Exactly.
some HTML code. People are trying to rebrand it, I think, in these cool new ways. And there's a lot of new opportunities. I think if you pull like a list of companies that are visiting your website, then you can pull up job titles that would be relevant, things more impactful, and stuff like B2B where you have to, it's like a big ship, you have to convince all these parties to be aligned. So there's new opportunities, but yeah, a lot of, I think with those new tactics, it's like historically what we've been doing on the ad platforms, just repackaged in a new way.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of this stuff has been marketing 101 for years, right? But it's new to these other channels. And I think these other channels have become bigger and bigger because of one, companies like Clay that have, popularized all of these tactics and given you so many ways to use AI and intertwine those types of things with the existing tactics that have existed for years. And then you've got this whole outbound crew, right? That's doing outbound in a silo. And yeah, I mean, I think the problem lies right there is that it's in a silo. So yeah, I mean, that's what
Yeah.
our goal is as an agency, is to bridge that gap between outbound versus marketing. I say this all the time to clients, but the truth is the reason Ali and I joined forces to build Understory into what it was is because my background is in sales. Ali's is in marketing. I can tell you firsthand, sales is constantly just dogging on marketing. They don't do anything. What do? They just sit there behind their screens, get the big salary, and deliver us nothing. And then marketing on the flip side is saying we're delivering all of this qualified pipeline for sales, and they never do anything to follow up on it. So meanwhile, all of these hot leads are just slipping through the cracks. They're both right, but I will say I'm gonna give an edge here to marketing on being right more often. I think salespeople as a whole, myself as a former salesperson and still a salesperson at heart, I was definitely one of the perpetrators of this act of just saying marketing's not giving us anything. And I think it's just a cop out. There's a good chance there is marketing qualified leads that are coming through and you just have no idea how to access them. So that's where the gap exists. Marketing is doing their job, but they're not bridging that gap to sales in the right way. A lot of times that's, the job of a sales leader or something like that in a company. But if they don't know about those deals, they can't close those deals. And that's why
Yeah.
we exist. That's really why we exist.
Yeah, and I don't think, I don't mean to say like it's just like a bunch of sales bros who like discovered website retargeting or whatever. Um, in my opinion, I think like obviously I'm biased to this, but I think marketers, if they're not going to be engineers, like they're some of the smartest people at the company, and sometimes they get too invested in the tools that they're using and they really hyper focus on like the specific like outcomes related to like the ad platforms. So like case in point with like website retargeting, we try to optimize for scale, but like salespeople are looking for like the highest intent leads. Like I don't care if the audience size needs to be a certain size or something like that. I'm trying to find the person who's most interested in buying whatever I have. So I think it's really cool that we have a new perspective on all the new tooling too, just because GTM engineering has exploded the last like year or two.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And what do when you think about GTM engineering as a whole, my take on GTM engineering is those people who would have been in sales or maybe formerly were in sales, like myself, who have that sales acumen, know how to close deals, know how to qualify pipeline, know how to move quickly. Now they're learning some of the tooling that's existed from marketing for a long time. And now they're building these crazy workflows with tools like Clay and stuff like that. And then you've got the people like myself and Naufal who have those sales backgrounds that are just bridging that gap between what's possible from data, what's possible from a pipeline creation standpoint, and how do you actually convert that into real qualified opportunities for your business. So yeah.
Just imagine if what we knew now when we had our jobs, we'd
Oh
just
my
be
God.
raking it in.
I know. Well, that's why I'm not in traditional sales anymore, is because I was always handcuffed in terms of what I could do in terms of tooling, and I was always trying to talk to the marketing VPs like, how can we do this? How can we do that? And they say, oh, you're just a sales guy. You have no idea what you're talking about. So now we help them from other companies and no longer at that company. But
Oh,
Chris,
that's changed.
right before you fell off, we were talking about how we're driving a lot of website traffic. And for people that are searching for companies that we're cold emailing on behalf of, we're generating a lot of pipeline with branded search ads too and competitor campaigns. So why don't you talk some about that and how we're using that in Understory to drive pipeline for our clients?
Yeah, for sure. So the remarketing is a big part. So I'll start with the competitors. B2B SaaS, especially, it's really important, I would say, to bid on your competitors. Like, one thing is it really depends on the client. It's a conversation that we always have with them at the beginning is what is your tolerance for bidding on your competitor? Because you can kind of start a sort of war with people that sometimes like they might not be comfortable with. They might not want to put the name in the ad copy. They might not want to do it at all. But the thing about competitor campaigns for search in paid search is it's already really high intent traffic because you know that they're researching the solution. You know that they know like they're problem aware, they're solution aware. And you're just taking that traffic because like studies show that I believe it's the average B2B buyer already has 4 out of 5 of their options in mind. And so we want to be that fifth. And so if we're bidding on the other 4, we show up, we can get in that fifth slot. And, a lot of times people that are searching, it might not be like the CEO or the big decision maker. It's someone that's like been tasked with putting a slide deck together for that person. So we want to make it on that slide deck. And then what we do with remarketing is make sure we move up that slide deck and stay on it as they keep researching.
That's interesting. And there's something else that came to mind. I saw the stat somewhere, but it was like 80% of people end up going with the first provider that they talk to when they're looking for a solution. So if you could be that first one when they actually have a conversation, right? Because you're spot on. We live in an age of unlimited information. So people can do all their research. They can go on Reddit, they can go on YouTube, they can look for testimonials, they can go on Quora, and they can find everything they need to know about a particular category or a particular company before they ever even have a conversation with you. So when they go to search for this company finally and they're actually ready to make a buying decision, if they go search on Google and the first thing they see is your company, whether or not you were that fifth company or not, if you're the first thing they see and you're the first person to have a conversation with them, 80% of the job is done from there.
Exactly. And every time they're searching for one of the other competitors they're putting on their list, it's like you're showing up each time. It makes you look official. It makes you look like you have it together, like from a technical perspective. And especially like we're dealing with tech companies, right? We're dealing with SaaS companies. So it's really important to show that like their marketing team, their whole GTM team has it together technically. And like we're across the whole ecosystem. And you also have full control over what you put in the ad copy, right? So you can tailor it to each competitor. It's like you don't want just some bland like brand normal message ad for every competitor. You can put together like pros and cons. That's something we use Clay for a lot actually on the paid search side is we'll put in the companies that we know are competitors and enrich those and then use things like Clayagent, use other AI tools that are integrated with it to scan their websites, scan like decision makers at the company, like people, LinkedIn profiles, all of that. We find the pros and cons, we find differentiators between them and our client or them and us in some cases.
And that helps you tweak the ad copy.
Exactly. And then we can tweak the ad copy to be like, exactly what we do better. And we can also find like the potential buyers of that type of solution and see like what are their main pain points that they care about. And then we tweak the ad copy, like combining both of those. So it's like we know this is their big pain point and we know this is what we do better because we've found that information. And I think that's something we do great at Understories because like before I started working here, I didn't know what Clay was, right? And a lot of people in paid search don't. So it gives us a big advantage that like I feel like Clay is usually used for outbound because that's kind of how it started. That's the community it's in, but it's just underutilized in search.
It's underutilized all over the place. I mean, clearly they've started to make some serious progress towards CRM enrichment and other plays like that related to the CRM. But yeah, I mean, paid search related use cases. I want to talk about Reddit too while we're here. But I know also some of the stuff you're talking about with the research on competitors, we end up using that copy for LinkedIn ads too. So when we're doing, all different types of campaigns on LinkedIn, whether they're conversational ads, whether they're retargeting ads, whatever they are, we end up using a lot of that copy on LinkedIn ads too. And it also helps when building the creatives. But I do want to talk a little bit about Reddit because Reddit is super hot in my mind right now. It's something that we're seeing more and more of our clients asking for. We've been doing more of it ourselves. Ollie, I'm going to ask you some questions here too. But something I'm really excited about in general is Clay's new integration with Reddit, where you can actually monitor subreddits actively on a schedule with scheduled enrichments and be able to determine whether or not keywords are being referenced, company names, things like that, which just gives us such a clear understanding of where we should be advertising on Reddit as well. But Ali, I would love to hear some of how we're using Reddit today for our clients. And obviously, I have a million ideas for how we're going to start incorporating Clay more and more with that integration. But I'd love to hear your take on it too. We haven't even talked about this yet.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into like a specific use case that we're testing right now. I think generally what we're finding Reddit to be effective for is just showing up in channels outside of LinkedIn, like the traditional ones, where your audience is, in order to build trust with them. Totally honestly, we haven't seen a ton of conversion volume from that channel just yet, but feedback we're getting from clients is it's coming up more and more in sales calls. I saw your content on Reddit, that kind of thing. So it's definitely more of an awareness play for now. And it also comes down to like the reporting. So we build like custom dashboards for all of our clients advertising on Reddit, and we're plugging into the backend API to pull metrics you wouldn't have access to in the platforms. I think that these channels have a lot of data in the backend that they're not willing to share. But if you plug into the API, it just makes it a lot easier. So that's one way we're just like, being more successful on Reddit. We could have a whole conversation about the types of content also that you should be running. I mean, Redditors are like one of the most like skeptical audiences. It's usually, people who distrust advertisers and who like to just comment on bad ads all the time. So, you have to be really intentional about the types of
Reddit
content
warriors. You get all the people that
Yeah, the
just
Reddit
want to say
warriors.
horrible things behind the facade of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Reddit account.
exactly. And I think what you were saying, the list is the message. I think the original quote is the medium is the message, and like Reddit itself is like, that's the type of like atmosphere that you have to be take into account. Like LinkedIn is a professional network, so people expect that kind of advertising. But yeah, I think one playbook that we're running right now on Reddit, and this is actually inspired directly by Chris on what he's doing with I think DSAs and mining keywords on Google ad side of things. But right now we're running retargeting campaigns based on anybody who's been on the website and then goes on Reddit and serve ads to them that way. But we're targeting them across all subreddits. And so we're able to like mine information about the users essentially. Like, there could be certain channels or certain subreddits that they're visiting that you wouldn't have considered before. And so you can use that kind of information across different channels, whether it's outbound or even finding that subreddit and commenting organically. It might be a channel or untapped market that you wouldn't have any idea about. So that's a playbook we're testing right now. And then like very similar to Google ads, like if we see any weird subreddits, like, we're retargeting website traffic. So there's bound to be people who visit who might not be like related to and so we'll just exclude those subreddits. Very similar to like negative keywords.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just going to get easier and easier for us to be able to do this at scale with this new Clay integration because we can easily determine which subreddits are gathering which information. Plus, it's helpful for us on the outbound side too to be able to monitor Reddit because we can also see which keywords are being talked about that we can then use in our outbound copy, and drive more top of funnel traffic by gauging the interests of people on a specific subreddit that we know could potentially be buyers of our client solutions. So, I mean, all this stuff is so intertwined, and I feel like people are just scratching the surface on how to blend them together. And one thing I'm really proud of that we do so well at Understory is we are really on the forefront of developing these playbooks. And, in a lot of ways, we're pioneering what's next on how you do multi-channel marketing, allbound, and really bring some of those tactics that were reserved for just marketers into sales and marketing as a whole and GTM as a whole. That's something I'm really excited
Yeah.
about personally.
Totally. And that's what I was saying, like, about marketers. I think we just get so caught up in the tools and the channels that you forget that you're booking real meetings with real humans who are going to get on a call with like a salesperson and actually talk about something. Like, it doesn't matter where they are. It's just like important you're in front of them. So
Exactly.
that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I say that in my posts all the time on LinkedIn. When I refer to leads, I always put in parentheses humans, because people forget leads are not like these random robots that are just clicking around. These are real humans behind a computer screen that are showing interest in things that you have to say. So you need to treat people like humans and you're going to get human level results.
Yeah, I think that's like especially bad. I've seen just being in the Google Ads world so much and like being connected with people on LinkedIn. You see that so much because Google Ads is like, I don't know about more data driven than anything else, but it's definitely way more numbers that you're just dealing with every day. And I think people do just start to forget that like not only are these conversions that you're seeing real people and real meetings, but it's like this money is your client's money. These are real numbers. Like you need to treat it right. You need to be, treat it like your own money. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because people get really in the weeds with the numbers and then start forgetting. And it sparks new ideas of how to do stuff on the sales side. People are always talking about integrating sales and marketing. But if you're just like head down only looking at your channels data all day, then it's like you're going to be thinking about just that channel. But if you're thinking about it as like the whole ecosystem, as like these are real people, what's going to happen after this conversion? Like my job, yeah, I do the Google ads, but it's like my job isn't really done just because I got the conversion, right? It's like we want to help that actually turn into a closed one deal. And so like us doing all these different channels and like doing different things, sales automations and stuff, like I think that it sparks more ideas to help just all around doing
Yep.
things.
Yeah, totally. Something Ali and I talk about, because obviously Ali and I spend, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours a day probably talking on the phone. So we talk about quite a bit. But something that comes up all the time in our conversations, and I think what's gotten us to where we are today, is we always are thinking about how to reverse engineer an outcome, right? So it's identifying exactly what the end goal is and then reverse engineering the steps to get there, mapping out a plan and being consistent and following the plan, right? So it's like all of these things that we're talking about together, we don't just kind of treat it like the wild, wild west and just point and shoot wherever we think might work and go that way. We're always reverse engineering outcomes and working in pods to get there. And I think that's part of the reason we've been able to be successful. So it's like we have clients, Chris, you're working on every single one of these clients, but clients that are doing paid search, paid social, LinkedIn outbound, email outbound, you name it, every service that we have to offer, they're doing that with us. But the only reason that works so well for us and the reason those clients never churn and the reason that those clients are always extremely satisfied is because we work in a pod and we reverse engineer the outcome and then we map out the journey with each channel. And I think that's a critical component that a lot of people miss out on, is they're just thinking about all these channels in a silo. And you can say, I'm doing an all-bound approach because you're doing every channel, but that's not really an all-bound approach. That's a siloed multi-channel approach. An all-bound approach is really bringing a cohesive strategy together and mapping all of those things to work in unison, not in a silo. So I think that's something that we prioritize really heavily that's worked for us. And it's basically where we're making our big bets as a company. It's like being able to do all of that and then track the entire thing in one central location, which is usually, not always, in HubSpot, and being able to identify the entire buyer journey and the steps that each buyer is taking before they actually end up converting into a paying customer.
Yeah, and like I know there's one example, and I think you probably know which one I'm talking about with one of our clients that we were running like basically every service that we offer. And this was in HubSpot, right? And it was beautiful to see because it was like I think they got an outbound email originally, and then
They didn't respond to it.
yeah, they didn't respond to it. So like normally if you're just running outbound, you're an outbound agency, it's like, oh, no response, you're done. But what they did was this, I think then they like got a LinkedIn impression that inspired them more. Then they like came in through a brand search ad so we could see that they were coming in through Google as well. And there was more to it than that,
I'll
but it
break it
was
down for
like,
you. I
yeah,
remember it
yeah, you got
perfectly.
it.
I'll break it down. I'll dumb it down
It was
too, so
beautiful.
it's crystal clear here. We sent them an email. In our emails, we don't use a link ever because it harms deliverability. So what we'll do typically is we'll say company name dot in parentheses com. So it's not an actually clickable link, but you know how to get to the website. We sent them an email. They never responded to the email. In our mind, it's dead, right? But what they ended up doing, yes, they saw a LinkedIn ad and they actually clicked on a LinkedIn ad. And we know that because we were able to see the company was clicking all over that LinkedIn ad. Then from there, like you said, they gathered interest. They search the company name in Google. They get hit with a branded search ad. They click on that. They go to a landing page. They do a form fill. They convert. That lead actually turned into a real opportunity that was worth enough to pay for our retainer for the entire year. And we were able to track and literally visualize that entire journey in HubSpot. You can see step 1, email sent, no reply, but email sent. Step 2, we're seeing all these different clicks on LinkedIn, and we're able to see that through the custom dashboards that Ali mentioned in that piece. And then we see that they actually converted via a branded search ad on Google. And then you see the opportunity value and you see the exact person. You cross-reference that person with your email campaigns and it's the holy grail. When you see that, there's no better feeling. The process working the way it's supposed to work. So yeah, I mean, I talk a lot. I'll shut up. I'll let you guys talk more. But yeah, I mean, that's the understory dream right there.
Yeah, and I think it's also a perfect example of why like a lot of clients that come to us will say, "Oh, we don't want to do outbound. We had really bad results in the past," or "We don't want to do paid search. Like paid search doesn't work for us," so on and so forth. And it's like, "Oh, but they worked with an agency that only did that or only did that." And it's like, "But what
Or they
if?"
had an SDR team that couldn't perform because they were all working in a silo, sending generic templated emails. And they said, okay, I'm paying 40 grand a month for this SDR team internally that's never delivering. Then I'm paying another 20 grand a month for this paid search team and not much is coming through with it. Then I'm paying another 25, 30 grand a month for this paid social team and that's not working. So all in all, you're spending 75, 80K a month across the board for internal teams that aren't delivering because they're operating in a silo. Then you come work with an agency like ours and you get that unified approach. The results are drastically different.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's like I think a lot of companies have been turned off to certain channels. It's like, no, those channels might actually work for you. It's just they need to be working in combo with all these other things. It needs to be working in combo with your sales team, your GTM, like all your GTM motions. And then, like I said, it's just beautiful when it all comes together. And we see results like that all the time, which is amazing. It's always amazing when it's like we have this concept, we have this dream for what we're doing, and then we get to see it every day of like, oh, these channels actually do work together. We align the messaging, we align everything together, and then we can actually track it and see that it's working well.
Yep, exactly. Well, guys, what do you think?
Yeah, that went pretty well.
That was fun. I mean, that was the first one. I think we're going to be able to take clips from every